Hello and welcome back to Shiny Boots. It's been a while since I last posted, and since then I have visited 10 countries and filmed everything boots on the ground, all the interesting places that I've visited. I'm really excited to be showing you all of this footage and inspiring you to also go visit some of these incredible places all around the world. I'll be looking into current narratives and for us to get curious together about the historical timeline. We're going to begin with where I am right now, actually, which is a place called Ohrid in North Macedonia. It was the lake that originally brought me here, but then I found on the map some super interesting places to visit. Welcome to Shiny Boots. The lake itself is interesting enough, reportedly being the oldest natural lake possibly in the world, at an estimated 4 million years old. The lake is apparently the deepest in Europe and is divided in two, where the other half lies in Albania. Not only is the lake old, but Ohrid itself is ancient. Ohrid's history spans several millennia, and in antiquity was known as Lychnidos. I'm strolling along on my way up to the top of the hill to see the 2 points of interest, and I stumble across Church St. Sophia. It's pretty spectacular. The story is that it was perhaps built in the 10th century, and it seems to have been rebuilt in the 11th. Who knows what the story is? Ohrid is also known for once having 365 churches, one for each day of the year, and was referred to as the Jerusalem of the Balkans. As you can see, I'm just minding my own business again, and I come across this excavated site under the road. Okay, let's have a read. The site, Manchevci, was partially explored during 2007, and after the archaeological excavations at this archaeological site in the old urban core of Ohrid, an early Christian basilica was discovered. So as we know, this site is close to the Church of St. Sophia, where we just were, and we're moving towards the ancient theatre. And it says here it's in a densely populated part of the old city and probably stretches under the surrounding houses. This basilica, which is one of the 9 basilicas in the city, originates from the 4th to 5th centuries BC. It is evident that we are building on top of old cities. The mosaics were originally on the ground, but they've decided to take them out and put them on the walls now for display purposes. I found this video on YouTube, filming the same area where the mosaics are still on the ground. Now we're going to mooch over to the other side of the street and see that there's still more city underneath. They're excavating even more walls and buildings and structures that we are standing on top of. I thought I'd check out the population of Lychnidos because it was a city. It was a city back then. And it says it's estimated between 20 and 30,000. And currently 38,000 people live in Ohrid. So, yeah, roughly the same. The ancient theatre was presumably built somewhere between the end of the 3rd and the beginning of the 2nd century BC. So it's over 2,200 years old. It's nestled between 2 hills and provides natural acoustics and protection from prevailing winds. It was originally used for theatrical performances. It's believed the theatre could hold 5,000 spectators. 5,000. If the city only had 20,000 inhabitants, that's a quarter of the city could be seated within this amphitheatre. A few hundred years go by, and at some point the theatre falls into a state of disrepair and was eventually buried. The structure was found in the 1910s, and a team of Russian archaeologists excavated the theatre, and it was later restored and reopened to the public. And today you can go and watch some concerts there. So we've visited the amphitheatre, and now we are on our way to see Samuel's fortress. When I was at the lake, I actually found a wall that looks like a castle. Turns out this is a lower gate to the city wall. It got me thinking, how big was this fortress and how far did these city walls stretch? As I reached the top, this is the first wall that I came across. I go to the other side of the wall and there's a car park, and I decide to follow the wall all the way round. I hadn't consulted the map beforehand, so I actually had no idea how far this was going to be, but you're going to see from all of the footage that I went all the way round. Let's have a little look at the history of Samuel's fortress. According to Wiki, Ohrid was the capital of the First Bulgarian Empire during the rule of Tsar Samuel of Bulgaria at the turn of the 11th century. The fortress of Tsar Samuel was probably built by King Philip II of Macedon, and this is in the 4th century BC. BC. And that's pretty much all you get from Wiki. That is all of the information about this place. Okay, we are coming up to the part of the fortress where the wall becomes buried. The path is going uphill and the wall starts getting shorter and shorter. And I think, oh, that's the end of it. It just isn't there anymore. But in fact, it is buried. I start realising that this is probably not the way that people normally get in. But I continue on my mission round and keep finding parts of the wall buried under this foliage. Until at some point the wall comes back into view and I continue round the visible walls of the fortress. Back to the history. King Philip II of Macedon was in fact Alexander the Great's father. Okay, so I'm going to try and find some more information. Right, I've got this website. And it actually says the first traces of a fortification, which Philip II of Macedonia, may have further developed, come from the Encheleans, if that's how you say it, in the 4th century BC. The Encheleans. Who are they actually? They're an ancient people that lived around the river Drin in the region of Lake Ohrid. They are one of the oldest known peoples of the eastern shore of the Adriatic Sea. These people were around in the 6th century BC, and it looks like maybe they started building the fortress. Again, the story is a bit wavy. It says over time the citadel and surrounding areas have been built, rebuilt. So the original fortress had about 20 walls and gate towers, and the city walls were between 6 and 16 metres high. These walls are really high. You can actually walk around the whole top of the fortress, and people were really scared at the top. There were a few people who were having to come down. There's a guy who said he was scared of heights. I don't know why he went up there in the first place. He was trying to get his money back. We'll go around the wall soon. But as I reach the gate, my phone dies.
1 hour later.
I had to go to a nearby cafe to charge my phone so I could film the inside of the fortress. And it really got me thinking about technology and how it often lets us down nowadays, even when we are apparently at our peak technologically. So what about in the 2nd, 3rd and 4th century BCE? When we're given time frames of how long it took for a building to be constructed, it seems pretty unrealistic when you start to break down all of the factors that were potentially against them. Things like weather, war, the number of people, the fact that they didn't have technology in the same way that we had. They had to rely on horses. So I decided to ask ChatGPT to tell me how the amphitheatre was built. And I chose to focus on the amphitheatre because it was built in the 2nd century BC. There doesn't seem to be any dispute over that. and it was used for centuries for entertainment purposes and gladiators, and then at some point in time it becomes buried. ChatGPT gives me a summary of the points I've already mentioned and then focuses on techniques and tools used during this time, which are chisels, hammers, wedges, and wooden cranes and pulleys. So this is the narrative that we're told of what people were doing in this time period. I asked the question how long it would have taken to hand chisel the stones. The reply is that the hand chiseling would have been slow and labour intensive. I'm given rough time estimates. Small blocks are 2 to 4 days, medium 1 to 2 weeks, and massive blocks 3 to 6 weeks per block. The amphitheatre seating would have probably taken 5 to 10 days per block. So the estimated time we're given for the construction of the amphitheatre is 10 to 20 years. And large public buildings like temples would have likely have taken 5 to 15 years. So then I'm like, okay, how many blocks are there approximately in the amphitheatre? There's estimated 20 rows. AI does some calculations and estimates that there's 3,000 to 4,500 blocks. I question the maths, which AI acknowledges is right to do so, and says let's break this down with more accurate estimates considering realistic working conditions and seasonal limitations. Like, what were you doing before? I question transportation and the time it takes to move all of these blocks, which also adds to the construction time and the total time of the project. Transportation alone is now estimated to be 3 to 8 extra years. The total time of construction has now gone up to 15 to 28 years, but 20 to 30 years is a safer estimate. I then ask how many wars were happening during the construction of the amphitheatre, and we are provided with an overlap of wars. ChatGPT understands war affects construction, and that would have caused delays. I then ask how many stonemasons would have been around at that time. Surely the population was low and men are fighting wars. And then I also ask AI to include illnesses into the next calculation. AI says I'm absolutely right to consider this, of course. So apparently Lychnidos had 5,000 to 10,000 inhabitants at its peak. Yeah, even less than what I stated at the beginning. According to the calculations, 2,000 to 4,000 men would have been present in this city. And if we subtract the soldiers, which is about 1,000 to 3,000 remaining, and consider that not all of them are builders, we're left with 50 to 150 skilled stonemasons, and that's being generous. AI's words, not mine. The revised times now brings the new guesstimate to 30 to 40 years. I bring in the question of horses. Obviously horses were used, that's what the narrative tells us. Feeding the horses, and then obviously people need break times and the logistics of big projects. After all that is calculated, the revised time is now realistically 40 to 70 years. Realistically. My final question is, weren't they building those 365 churches at the same time? Oh, yes, they were, AI replies. But apparently the legend of Ohrid having 365 churches is likely an exaggeration. There is an acknowledgement that the amphitheatre wouldn't have been the only priority, and therefore the workforce would definitely have been divided between multiple projects. When we first asked about the construction time, we were quoted with 10 to 20 years, and now after I've asked a few questions, the construction time is now approximately 50 to 100 years. All of my questions were logical, using critical thinking. Why is this not done in the mainstream? Why is it just assumed that building an amphitheatre over 2,000 years ago with no equipment, using hand chisels to carve stones, would have been done in 10 years? And we're not even sure how far down the amphitheatre goes. We haven't uncovered all of it. It feels like we make these mass generalizations and really bold statements with no evidence, really. AI is reflecting back to us how ridiculous these stories are. AI is simply showing us all of the information that is on the internet. These are the stories that are in the history books that are being taught to us from an early age, but the stories don't make sense. In a matter of 5 minutes, I pointed out to artificial intelligence, it is intelligent, that this story doesn't make sense, and it agreed with me. It went from a construction time of 10 to 20 years to 50 to 100 years. 100 years feels more believable if they had no technology. 10 years doesn't. We have buildings that are constructed nowadays that take longer than 10 years, and they're nowhere near as impressive, and we have technology. So where does the truth lie? I'll tell you where it lies. It lies in these bushes. Let's do a little recap of where I've been before we go rooting through the bushes. Here's the fortress. And I came up from the car park over here, followed the wall all the way around, walked through this wooded area, all the way around to the front gates here. And as I left, I decided to take the path, which is obviously the usual route for people to get into the fortress. And I spotted, obviously, the other side of the wall where I'd been. And it got me thinking, okay, how much more of this wall can I find? I end up back at the same spot where there were loads of cars. Go up this little road here, following the wall, as you can see. And I find this little entrance and end up in this wooded area, finishing at the clock tower. Here we go. You can see the fortress in the far background, and here I am following the wall, which would have been the city walls, into this entrance, which is underground. The brickwork is absolutely incredible and still in pretty good nick. And as I go through, I end up in a place that is pretty off-piste. There isn't really a well-trodden path. At times I'm walking through brambles and bushes, but I keep stumbling across the wall hidden behind all of this foliage. There are times I think I've lost the wall and then it comes back into view. I find another entrance, but there seems to be quite a lot of mud and no way to access it really. But it's in the same design as the first one that I saw. You'll notice how thick these walls are. There are bricks everywhere, even on the ground where the wall has started to fall apart. But these walls are really well built. I remember reading an article about Roman cement and how we actually don't know what the mixture contained and how these walls are so strong. And it just goes to show, because even 1,000, 2,000, however many thousand years later, these walls are still standing. Oh, hang on, a hot mixing minute. The riddle apparently is solved as of 6th of January 2023. It seems that they've figured out what makes Roman concrete so strong. The findings are published in the journal Science Advances. For many years, researchers have assumed that the key to the ancient concrete's durability was based on one ingredient, something to do with volcanic ash. I love that they say previously disregarded as merely evidence of sloppy mixing practices. They knew the concrete had these white bits inside called lime clasts. And this guy says the idea that the presence of these lime clasts was simply attributed to low quality control always bothered me. We thought it was because the Romans were being sloppy. So the conclusion is, after studying samples of this ancient concrete and including these white inclusions, which are made from various forms of calcium carbonate, they've now concluded that it's something to do with extreme temperatures, so hot mixing. If you're interested in having a look further, here is the article. It's got equations like this, diagrams like this. Super geeky if you're into rocks. It's becoming more evident to me that the problem with modern society is that when you believe you're the most intelligent, you don't feel like you have anything to learn from your ancestors. Making assumptions like the Romans were sloppy, even though the evidence suggests otherwise, highlights a deep mind virus in scientific fields. When you're constantly aiming for the evidence to fit the narrative, that's where it all starts falling apart. And I feel like that's what people who are doing this research are looking into. Does this make sense? As opposed to how does this fit into the timeline? Keep an open mind, everyone. The truth will prevail. See you next time.